Most people imagine that the strongest warriors in Japanese history were defined by physical talent, speed, power, mastery of the blade. But the old masters knew that the real war was never fought with steel. It was fought in silence, in the inner chambers of the mind. Among the many hidden disciplines practiced by elite samurai families, there existed one technique whispered about but rarely taught, a mental art so potent it was reserved only for warriors capable of confronting every corner of their own psyche. It was called Kage no Jizei, the alignment of the shadow self. And the last known samurai who mastered this forbidden practice was a man almost erased from historical memory, Takeshi Igarashi, the warrior who learned to control his mind so completely that fear, hesitation, and emotional turbulence became powerless before him. Takeshi was not born invincible. In fact, he was born with the one enemy a warrior is never supposed to have, a mind that devoured him from the inside. As a child, he was the boy who couldn't stop overthinking, the boy who rehearsed every possible failure before he ever attempted anything, the boy who feared speaking in front of others, whose hands trembled during practice, whose sleepless nights were filled with endless what-ifs. While his peers perfected their sword forms, Takeshi drowned in mental storms he could not understand. His instructors whispered that he had a weak spirit. His classmates mocked him, calling him the trembling leaf. And Takeshi believed them, believing something was wrong with him, believing he was not built for the warrior path. One evening, after failing a simple demonstration because his anxiety froze him in front of everyone, Takeshi returned home defeated. He collapsed onto the floor, overwhelmed by shame. His father, a retired swordsman known for his unusual depth of wisdom, sat across from him in silence. Finally he said, "Your problem is not fear." Takeshi looked up, confused. His father continued, "Your problem is that you do not know the part of you that controls your mind. You only know the part that is controlled by it." And in that moment, Takeshi understood something he had never realized before. His real opponent was not the other students, not the sword, not the training, but the untrained parts of himself he had been running from his whole life. When Takeshi turned 14, his father sent him away to train under a man most warriors considered a myth, Master Ryojin, a reclusive philosopher warrior who lived alone in the frozen northern mountains. Ryojin no longer took students, and he was known to reject nearly everyone who sought him out. Yet Takeshi was sent without explanation, only given a single message to deliver: "My son cannot silence the chaos within him. Teach him if you can." Takeshi didn't know what to expect, but he carried that letter like it was a lifeline. The journey to Ryojin's mountain took 3 days through icy winds and treacherous cliffs. When Takeshi finally reached the small wooden hut where the master lived, the old man didn't greet him warmly. He didn't even look surprised. The first words he spoke were brutally direct. "Your mind is too loud. I could hear your thoughts as you climbed." Takeshi, embarrassed, bowed deeply, but Ryojin only shook his head. "Do not bow. You are not here to behave. You are here to transform." Without explaining anything, Ryojin shoved a broom into Takeshi's hands and pointed at the frozen courtyard. "Clean," Takeshi obeyed. Minutes turned into hours as he swept the icy ground. Every time Takeshi paused to catch his breath, Ryojin barked from inside the hut, sometimes telling him to go faster, sometimes slower, sometimes to switch hands, sometimes to think, sometimes to stop thinking. Nothing made sense. By sunset, Takeshi was mentally shattered, more exhausted from confusion than the physical labor. Finally, he snapped. "What does this have to do with training? What am I learning from this?" Ryojin stepped out, looked him directly in the eyes and said calmly, "If I can control your mind with random words, you have no mind of your own." The truth hit Takeshi harder than any strike. He realized he wasn't reacting to the broom, the cold, or the work. He was reacting to every thought, command, emotion, and impulse inside his head. He was a puppet pulled by invisible strings, and the puppeteer was his own untrained mind. Over the following weeks, Ryojin taught Takeshi something he had never heard before. Not silence, not calmness, not the removal of thoughts, but the understanding that inside every human being lives two versions of the self. One is the acting self, the you who speaks, moves, chooses. The other is the shadow self, the unseen observer inside your mind that comments, criticizes, judges, and sabotages. The shadow self is the voice that whispers, "You're not enough," or they're watching, or you should quit, or you're going to embarrass yourself. Most people try to silence this voice. Others try to fight it. Both approaches fail. Ryojin taught Takeshi something far more radical. You do not silence the shadow self, you recruit it. This was the forbidden principle. Not suppression, not denial, not escape, but alignment, emotional alchemy, the transformation of the inner critic into inner clarity, the merging of fear into focus, the integrating of doubt into precision. But before Takeshi could learn the actual technique, Ryojin had to test whether he had the courage to face the real battlefield of the mind. One dawn, Ryojin led Takeshi to the edge of a cliff overlooking a valley where violent winds howled endlessly. He told him to sit. Takeshi asked, "For how long?" Ryojin said, "Until the wind stops." Takeshi frowned. "But the wind never stops here." Ryojin simply smiled. "Exactly." Then he walked away. Takeshi sat in the blistering cold, the wind slashing at his face, the sky roaring around him. Minutes passed, then an hour. His thoughts became a hurricane. Frustration, fear, impatience, pain, self-doubt. Every instinct screamed at him to get up, to move, to quit. His inner voice attacked him relentlessly. "Why are you doing this? You're freezing. This is pointless. Just stand up." But Takeshi stayed, not because he was strong, but because he was beginning to understand that the storm was not around him, it was inside him, and he refused to let it rule him anymore. After many hours, the wind paused for only a few seconds. Takeshi didn't even notice at first. He was too focused on watching the shifting storms inside his own thoughts. When Ryojin returned, he leaned down and whispered, "You passed." Takeshi opened his eyes in confusion, but the wind never stopped. Ryojin nodded. "Yes, it did. The wind inside you." Takeshi's training deepened after that moment on the cliff, but it did not become easier. If anything, Ryojin became harsher, pushing him into psychological territories most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The old master believed that a warrior who feared his own mind was a danger to himself and everyone around him. "A sword in the hand of an unstable mind," he said one cold morning, "is more dangerous to its owner than to any opponent." Takeshi didn't fully understand what he meant yet, but he felt the truth in it. Every time he trained, every time he breathed, every time he tried to quiet his thoughts, he could feel invisible forces inside him, pulling in different directions. It was as if his mind was made of fragments that had never learned to work together. Ryojin started waking him before dawn, sometimes by knocking gently on his door, other times by throwing a bucket of ice water on his face. There was no pattern, no routine. Every day felt unpredictable. "Your mind clings to predictability like a dying man clings to breath," Ryojin told him. "I must break that." Takeshi didn't argue. He followed the master into the forest, onto icy peaks, across rivers that numbed his bones. On some days they walked in silence for hours. On others, Ryojin spoke endlessly about things Takeshi struggled to grasp. Ancient philosophy, the nature of the self, the difference between instinct and impulse, the subtle line between awareness and consciousness. And woven through all of it was a single theme, the shadow self. Takeshi soon realized that the shadow self wasn't some mystical entity. It was his fear in a hidden form, his insecurity wearing a mask, his guilt whispering through the cracks. He began noticing its presence everywhere. When he wanted to stop training because his legs burned, that was the shadow. When he hesitated before speaking, that was the shadow. When he imagined failure before even trying, that was the shadow. It had been controlling him for years, and he had never recognized its voice until Ryojin forced him to see it. One evening, after a grueling day of training, Takeshi sat outside the hut staring at the darkening sky. The mountains around him were silent except for the soft sound of the wind moving through the pines. He felt something shift inside him, a subtle awareness he hadn't felt before. For the first time, he wasn't lost inside his thoughts. He was simply observing them. It was like watching clouds drift across the sky. They were present, but they didn't dominate him. Ryojin stepped outside and sat beside him without saying a word. After a long, quiet moment, the old master spoke. "You're beginning to separate yourself from the noise." Takeshi nodded. "Is that the technique?" Ryojin shook his head. "No, that's the preparation. The technique is far more dangerous." The next morning, Ryojin blindfolded him. Takeshi felt the rough cloth tighten around his head, plunging him into complete darkness. The master led him into the forest, saying nothing, giving no instructions. Takeshi heard the crunch of snow beneath their feet and the occasional distant howl of wolves. After a while, Ryojin stopped and placed Takeshi's hand on the hilt of a wooden practice sword. "Listen carefully," he said. "I'm going to attack you from different directions. You will not block with instinct, you will not block with fear, you will not block with thought. You will block only when your shadow tells you to." Takeshi didn't understand. Before he could ask, he heard the rush of movement cutting through the air. He swung wildly and missed. A wooden strike hit his ribs, knocking the breath from him. Another came from behind, striking his shoulder, then his leg, then his arm. Ryojin moved around him like a ghost, attacking with unpredictable timing. Takeshi tried to anticipate, tried to calculate, tried to guess, and every attempt failed. Hours passed, his body bruised, his energy drained, his mind spiraled in self-doubt. The shadow inside him mocked him. "You'll never get this. You're slow, you're hopeless, you're failing again." Then something unexpected happened. After one particularly hard strike, Takeshi dropped to his knees, exhausted. Something inside him cracked, not physically, but mentally. A strange quietness washed over him, like sinking beneath the surface of water where all sound vanished. In that silence, he realized something shocking. He was trying too hard. He was thinking too loudly. He was fighting not Ryojin, but his own desperation to predict the future. He let out a slow breath, and in that moment, he simply allowed himself to feel. Not think, feel. The world remained dark under the blindfold, but something inside him opened. The sound of wind brushing against leaves, the faint shift of Ryojin's weight on the snow, the direction of displaced air, the intention in each movement, all of it became clear without needing to interpret it. When the next attack came, Takeshi blocked it effortlessly, then another, then another. His hands moved before the thought even formed, his body responded before fear could interfere. Ryojin struck faster, harder, at unpredictable angles, but Takeshi moved fluidly, blocking each attack with a calmness he had never experienced. It was as if the shadow inside him had stepped out of hiding, no longer sabotaging him but guiding him. When the training finally stopped, Takeshi stood trembling, not from pain but from revelation. Ryojin untied the blindfold and stared into his eyes. "Do you understand now?" Takeshi nodded slowly. "The shadow is not my enemy." Ryojin smiled, a rare warmth crossing his face. "No, it never was. The part of you that frightens you, the doubt, the fear, the insecurity, is also the part that can protect you, warn you, sharpen you. The shadow only becomes dangerous when you deny it. When you recruit it, it becomes your deepest ally." Takeshi felt something inside him shift permanently. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel afraid of his own mind. The chaos was still there, but it no longer owned him. It was no longer a storm, it was a source of power waiting to be harnessed. Ryojin placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is only the beginning," he said. "To master yourself, you must do more than align with your shadow. You must learn to converse with it." The days that followed were unlike anything Takeshi had ever imagined. Now that he had opened the door to the shadow self, Ryojin pushed him deeper into regions of the mind most people never dare enter. Takeshi expected more physical trials, more blindfolded combat, more exhausting walks through the icy mountains. But what came next was infinitely more difficult, because it forced him to confront not his body, but the parts of himself he had spent years avoiding. "Strength without inner clarity is chaos," Ryojin told him one evening as they sat by the fire. "And chaos is what has ruled you your entire life. Now you must walk into it willingly." Takeshi didn't fully understand what that meant until the next morning. Ryojin placed a single candle in the center of the hut, lit it, and told Takeshi to sit across from it. "Watch the flame," he said. "Do nothing else." Takeshi waited for further instruction, but none came. Minutes passed, then an hour. The silence felt heavier than any training session. The flame flickered gently in front of him, steady yet unpredictable. At first, Takeshi's thoughts wandered everywhere. Old memories, imagined conversations, tomorrow's training, what the master expected from him. The shadow whispered continuously, reminding him of old failures, replaying past embarrassments, inventing future disasters. Ryojin said nothing. He only watched. Eventually, Takeshi realized that the exercise wasn't about the candle at all. It was about endurance, enduring his own mind the way he had endured the wind on the cliff. But this test was harder because there was no physical suffering to anchor him. There was only mental noise, growing louder with each passing moment. He tried to ignore it, but the more he resisted, the stronger the shadow became. He felt small, exposed, drowning in his own thoughts. At one point, he clenched his fist so hard his nails dug into his skin. "Master," he finally whispered through gritted teeth, "I can't silence it." Ryojin's answer was immediate. "Silencing it is not the point. Listening is." That sentence struck him with more force than any wooden sword ever had. He closed his eyes, took a slow breath, and stopped running. Instead of pushing the thoughts away, he let them come. Memories he hated, fears he never admitted, regrets he had buried. The shadow no longer hid in the corners. It stood in front of him, fully formed, speaking with the voice he always tried to escape. And for the first time, Takeshi didn't shrink from it. He didn't fight, didn't resist, didn't deny. He simply allowed the voice to exist. Slowly, the noise softened, the storm eased, and in that stillness, Takeshi realized something profound. The shadow self had never been trying to destroy him. It had been trying to protect him. Its weapons, fear, doubt, hesitation, were misguided forms of safety. It was guarding the fragile parts of him, the parts he pretended didn't exist. He opened his eyes. The candle flame seemed brighter now, steadier. Ryojin nodded approvingly. "You've taken another step," he said quietly. "When you stop fearing your shadow, you begin to hear what it is truly saying." The next stage of training took Takeshi beyond introspection and into something far more dangerous, the confrontation of his deepest internal contradictions. Everyone, Ryojin explained, contains divided intentions, the desire to be strong and the fear of failure, the wish to be calm and the addiction to chaos, the longing for acceptance and the resistance to vulnerability. These contradictions tear a person apart from the inside. Every warrior who dies with regrets, Ryojin said, is killed not by enemies but by his own contradictions. To expose Takeshi's contradictions, Ryojin created situations engineered to provoke emotional conflict. One morning he instructed Takeshi to chop firewood as fast as possible. Just when Takeshi reached full speed, Ryojin told him to slow down, but maintain precision. Then he commanded him to speed up again, while keeping the same level of accuracy. The conflicting instructions created a war inside Takeshi. His muscles obeyed one command, his mind obeyed another, and the shadow whispered both encouragement and doubt. Takeshi became furious, at the task, at himself, at the impossibility of satisfying both orders. He slammed the axe into the snow, breathing heavily. Ryojin approached him calmly. "Do you feel that?" Takeshi nodded, struggling to stay composed. "That is your nature tearing itself apart," Ryojin said. "You have lived like this for years. No wonder your mind exhausted you." Takeshi realized then that his whole life had been a battle between the person he wanted to be and the person he feared he was. And for the first time, he understood that his suffering had never come from the world, it had come from within. Ryojin placed a hand on his shoulder. "When your contradictions collapse into unity, your mind becomes unbreakable." From that day, Takeshi's training changed dramatically. The exercises became quieter, subtler. Ryojin gave fewer commands and instead let Takeshi navigate his own mind. Takeshi found himself noticing things he had never noticed before: the rhythm of his breath, the subtle shifts in his emotions, the tone of the shadow's voice. It no longer attacked him. It analyzed. It warned. It guided. He began to speak to it in moments of doubt. Why am I afraid? What am I trying to avoid? What am I protecting? And surprisingly, the shadow answered. Never in words, but in sensations, in clarity, in sudden understanding. One night, as the wind howled outside the hut, Takeshi awoke from a dream with a realization so sharp, it felt like a blade at his throat. He had spent his entire life assuming fear was something to overcome. But Ryojin had shown him the truth. Fear was something to understand. Doubt was something to learn from. Hesitation was a message, not a weakness. The shadow self was not his enemy, it was his untrained guardian. The next morning, Takeshi walked outside before Ryojin could wake him. He stood in the snow, breathing deeply, feeling the cold not as pain but as sensation. For the first time, he felt whole, no longer splintered by opposing desires. When Ryojin stepped outside and saw him, they exchanged no words. The master simply nodded, as if acknowledging that Takeshi had crossed a threshold few ever reach. But the training was not over. There was one final lesson, one final trial that no student before Takeshi had ever completed. The final trial began without warning. Takeshi woke to the sound of the hut door slamming open, the icy wind ripping through the room like a spirit. Ryojin stood in the doorway, his face harder than Takeshi had ever seen. "Get up," he said. "Bring nothing." Takeshi didn't question him. He stepped into the freezing darkness wearing only his training clothes. Ryojin began walking into the forest, and Takeshi followed silently. They moved through deep snow, past frozen streams and towering pines, until they reached the foot of a narrow path carved between two cliffs. It was a place Takeshi had never seen during all his months of training. Ryojin stopped and turned toward him. "This is where I lost my last student," he said quietly, "and where I nearly lost myself." Takeshi felt the weight of those words settle into his chest. He had known from the beginning that the forbidden technique was not some simple meditation or breathing exercise. It was a confrontation with something internal, something dangerous enough that most warriors never returned the same. Ryojin stepped aside and gestured to the path. "Today," he said, "you will meet the part of you that you have never dared to face, and you will do it alone." Takeshi bowed, not out of obedience but out of understanding. He began walking. The narrow path twisted upward between the cliffs, and every sound echoed strangely, as if the mountain were whispering to itself. The deeper he went, the heavier the air felt, thick with a tension he could not explain. The shadows cast by the cliffs stretched long and sharp across the snow, merging into shapes that seemed almost alive. Takeshi slowed his breath, grounding himself, but even that grounding felt fragile. He sensed he was leaving the physical world and stepping into a place governed by an entirely different set of rules. At the top of the path, the cliffs opened into a flat clearing surrounded by jagged stone. The sky above was dark, though dawn had only just begun. Takeshi stepped into the center, and something shifted, something internal. A sensation he had only felt once before, during the blindfolded trial, but far stronger. The shadow's self was here, not as a whisper, not as a feeling, but as a presence standing directly behind him. He didn't turn. He knew that if he did, he wouldn't see anything with his eyes. This confrontation was taking place in a realm deeper than the physical. The voice that came next wasn't spoken aloud, but it vibrated through his chest with chilling clarity. "Do you really want to know who you are?" Takeshi's breath froze. The shadow's tone had changed. It wasn't mocking or anxious or doubtful. It was ancient, familiar in a way that made his spine tighten. He closed his eyes, and the presence grew stronger, like a storm building behind him. "You think you've conquered me," the voice continued, "but you have only walked around me. You have listened, yes. You have endured, yes. But you have not faced what I truly am." Takeshi felt fear rising, hot and primal, but he didn't speak, he didn't run. Instead, he lowered himself to the snow, legs folded, back straight. He inhaled once, deeply. He felt the presence shift, circling him like a predator. "You want control," the shadow said, "but you have never accepted responsibility for the things you fear most." Images began flooding Takeshi's mind. Memories he had buried so deeply he had forgotten they existed. The first time he froze in front of a crowd. The look of disappointment on his father's face. The shame of running from challenges. The humiliation of failing when others succeeded. Every wound, every fear, every regret he had carried in silence now stood around him like figures in the snow. Takeshi's hands trembled. He wanted to look away. He wanted to deny, escape, reject, but he stayed. And for the first time, he didn't try to silence the voice. He asked it softly, "What do you want from me?" The presence paused, then, like a wave crashing over him, the answer came. To be acknowledged. Takeshi felt something inside him break open. He understood. His shadow was not built from failure. It was built from the parts of him he tried to hide from himself. His despair had created it. His denial had strengthened it. His silence had fed it. He whispered, "I see you." The presence shifted. "I know you," Takeshi said louder this time. The air trembled. "And I accept you. The shadow's form, unseen but undeniably alive, leaned forward, and Takeshi felt a cold touch on his back, like something merging with him. There was no pain, only release, only integration, only unity. It felt like two rivers meeting after years of flowing separately. For the first time in his life, Takeshi felt completely whole. And then, everything went still. The cold vanished, the fear evaporated, the clearing around him looked brighter. The sky opened, the storm inside him, the noise that had haunted him since childhood, dissolved into absolute clarity. When Takeshi stood, his movements felt different, lighter, precise, inevitable. He walked back down the path, through the cliffs, toward the place where Ryojin waited. The old master watched him approach with a look Takeshi had never seen, something like pride mixed with awe and a hint of sadness. Takeshi bowed deeply. When he rose, Ryojin spoke softly. "You have done what the others couldn't." Takeshi nodded. "I met myself." Ryojin stepped closer, placing both hands on the young warrior's shoulders. "No," he corrected, "you became yourself." They walked back to the hut in silence, but Takeshi didn't feel silence the way he once had. This silence felt alive, sharp, clear, and powerful. He no longer heard the shadow as a separate voice. He felt it woven into every breath, every intention, every instinct. When they reached the hut, Ryojin looked at him one final time and said, "Your training is complete. Remember this, the world will try to break you 1,000 different ways, but a man who is aligned with his shadow cannot be broken." Takeshi left the mountains the next morning, and when he returned to the world, people sensed immediately that something about him had changed. His calmness was beyond human. His presence felt immovable. His mind was no longer a battlefield, because Takeshi Igarashi had mastered the forbidden technique, not by conquering his shadow, but by accepting it, by listening to it, by becoming one with it. And from that day forward, he lived not as a man divided, but as a mind unified, unstoppable, and utterly free.